And now, breaking news from ESPN 630.
Within the last hour, the Wizards have announced that Wes Unseld Jr. will transition from head coach to front office advisory position. His record since being named head coach July 17, 2021, 77-130. And the Wizards this year are 7-36, ahead of only the Detroit Pistons, who they lost to on Martin Luther King's birthday. This has been, what do we expect? I really don't know what's behind this. This is a year that they're tanking, obviously, and I think they expected that the team would be bad, maybe not this bad, but what does it matter? I mean, right now they're sitting in the number 2 draft position. Wes Unseld was never going to be the long term of this team because Wes, he was hired when they still had, some players left on this team. They had signed Bradley Beal to that ridiculous extension, and they were looking to be a pretty decent team. And what we heard about Wes Unseld Jr. was, he's a defensive strategist. He had worked with the Denver Nuggets and had done great things for them defensively, and he was going to come here. Well, the Wizards are the worst defensive team in the NBA. In fact, just giving them the label of defense doesn't really do it justice because they don't have any defense. They're just defenseless. And so that clearly didn't work out. This was the statement from Michael Winger, president of the team. Said, after several thoughtful conversations with Wes, we determined together that a change was needed for the benefit of the team. Wes embodies the characteristics that we value in our organization, and his vast basketball experience will be an asset in the front office as we progress towards our long-term goals. We are thankful that he will continue his contributions to our organization and community. Well, what the heck, he's being paid. Unseld said, I am grateful to have served as head coach of the Washington Wizards. I look forward to this new opportunity to work towards our organization's continued progress. And they're supposed to name an interim coach later today. It doesn't really matter who it's going to be. They say they're going to look for a coach in the offseason. Maybe it's going to be dependent on where they actually wind up with the ping pong balls. Could they get the number 1 pick? That obviously would make them more attractive as a place to go. How long is this rebuild going to take? We don't know. But clearly Wes Unseld Jr. was not the answer. And I believe he got a contract extension in the offseason. I don't know, how that was worded. Maybe there was an off-ramp for it, whatever. But he's not going to be coaching the team anymore. They played last night against Minnesota and, lost again. Played, I guess, for them, not so bad. They only gave up 118 points, which is like 7 or 8 below their average for the season. But they're not a competitive team in any way. And, it's all about what's going to happen as they build with draft picks. Now, they've reversed course a bunch of times under Ted. And, frankly, the hiring of Wes Jr. wasn't a terrible hire. He had a good reputation as helping the defense in Denver. But it smacked of marketing by Ted. His dad is the greatest player in the history of the franchise. His dad was also a terrible coach and a terrible general manager. And his legacy is that he led this team to the one championship that they won in 1978 and then stayed in the organization for like probably another 20 years, 25 years, something like that. And it just didn't work out for him other than as a player. As far as a man, he's one of the finest men I ever met, sorely missed as a human being. But his coaching career was not successful, and his work as a general manager was not very successful as well. And now Wes Unseld Jr. is going to, I guess, serve out the rest of his contract doing something in the front office. I don't know if they want to make him a defensive consultant because his work as a head coach with defense did not work well at all. But Wes Unseld Jr. out with the Wizards, 7-36 on the season. I don't know what more there is to say about it, really. I don't think that this comes as a real shock. It's just that the timing of it is interesting. And, I wonder if when they gave him that contract extension in the offseason last year, if they thought that it would be for more than 1 year. Sometimes you reward a guy financially when he's going to take it in the shorts for a season, which they have so far. So what this means for the organization. I don't know. I mean, again, who is the hot name out there that you would want? We just saw a coach get fired with a 30-13 record. Doc Rivers is back. Doc Rivers wasn't going to come here. And, it's Doc Rivers' record. Yes, he's won a championship with the Celtics, but he's got the worst record in deciding games in the history of the game. And we'll get to more on that. Interesting thoughts from Tim Legler last night with Scott Van Pelt. We'll get to that at 10 o'clock. Also today on the Andy Pollin Show. Good morning, by the way. Also today, Ed Reed was one of the many interview subjects that Joe Buck had on his shows that he did several years ago, and this one swam to the surface on YouTube. And one of the things that he said, and I'm going to play this in about 20 minutes, John Harbaugh was not welcomed into the organization. John Harbaugh has been on the job now 16 years, and they may very well win their third Super Bowl this season, the second for Harbaugh. But when Brian Billick was fired and Harbaugh took over, wait till you hear what Ed Reed says the reaction of the team was. Wasn't open arms. Not at all. Not in any way. It got off to a rocky start. Talked about that. Also, tomorrow, I'm going to play the conversation with Joe Torre. And I had not heard this story before. Maybe it's been out there, but this to me was very interesting. Not hindsight, but very interesting historical perspective on what happened. The last World Series that Joe Torre managed with the Yankees was 2001, delayed because of 9/11. They played the first two games of the series on the road at Arizona, and they came home for Game 3 at Yankee Stadium. And then President George Bush threw out the first ball. Derek Jeter said, "Don't bounce it," and he threw a perfect strike off the mound. It was pretty much known, even at the time, that Bush was wearing a bulletproof vest. What Torre said was, though, that one of the umpires was undercover. He was a Secret Service agent, also wearing a bulletproof vest and with a gun. And he said, he came out to give the lineups at the start of the game, and he knew, of course, all the umpires. He's been in the game forever. And he didn't recognize one of them, and he was told that's a Secret Service agent for George Bush. Interesting, very great, good stuff that came out of this, and we'll play that tomorrow. Ed Reed today. Also, got the background now on not Travis Kelce's performance in the playoff game at Buffalo, his brother's performance in the box, the old school, the Will Ferrell, almost Will Ferrell all the way performance. And the brothers talked about it yesterday on their podcast. And in the next hour, if you missed it yesterday on the Tony Kornheiser Show, Mitch Albom, who has been a sports writer in Detroit for almost 40 years, mostly a writer now, not so much sports, but did write sports for a long time. We'll give you the picture of what it's like to live in Detroit with now America's team moving on in the playoffs. I think a lot of people have gravitated to the Lions, except ones who are 49er fans. I think most people would like to see the Lions play in the Super Bowl, even though they're a 7-point underdog, 6.5-point underdog coming up in the NFC Championship game. All right, let me get to the Maryland game last night. I watched almost the entire game, certainly the finish. And it's still going to be an uphill climb for them to get to the NCAA tournament. They're sub 500 in the Big Ten, 4-5. But this was a nice win last night. They were playing Iowa. They fell behind early, down by 10. They were down 7 or 8 in the last 6 minutes or so. And they managed to take the lead. And they did it once again on the back of Jahmir Young. This team is really a horrible team without Jahmir Young. But Jahmir Young is the kind of player, 50-year senior, who can put a team on his back and take over late in games, which he did last night, scoring the last 8 points of the game. He hit a big 3 to put them up 2, and then there was a stupid foul that was made. So then Iowa hit the 2 free throws. They tie it, and it comes down to this. There's a timeout called with 20 seconds left. It's a tie game, 67-67. And Kevin Willard says that in the huddle, Jahmir Young says, "I want the ball." It's kind of like Jimmy Chitwood. And who wouldn't give him the ball, right? I mean, this is the guy that you have to rely on in these situations. He has put games away in the past. Wasn't able to do it against Michigan State last weekend in College Park, but he got it done last night. Here's the quote from Willard. He said he wanted it, and he said he asked for it, and when a guy like Jahmir asks for it, you're going to give it to him. And, in fact, he did score the last 8, including these 2, as called by Kevin Kugler on the Big Ten Network.
Young looking. 5 seconds. Here comes Scott for the screen. Young to work on the run. Off the window. Got it. 1.5 to play. And Maryland with the 2-point lead.
Yep, and that's the way they closed it out. Iowa put up a half-court shot that was way short, and Maryland wins 69-67. Now here, when you look at the box score, and they are not a good shooting team at all. They were sub 500, a good shooting night for them, 24 of 51 from the field. And on three-pointers, they were great for them, 7 of 15. I mean, for that team to shoot close to 50% on threes, that's something. And it's an Iowa team that was scoring a lot of points. They were getting like 80, close to 88 points a game at home, and Maryland held them to 67 points last night. And most importantly, and this is what has been missing the whole season, the big 3 all have to score, and they did. Julian Reese had 17 points. He even hit his free throws last night. Dante Scott, who's had some horrendous games for them, and Reese too. Reese has had a game where he didn't scored only 1. Scott couldn't put the ball in the ocean sometimes. He was 5 of 11 from the field. He had 14 points. And then you had Jameer Young, who didn't have his best night. He missed 6 of his first 9 shots, but was 7 of 15 from the field and finished with 22. Those are the numbers that you really have to get from those 3 guys for this to be a team that's competitive. And Julian Reese with 17, Dante Scott 14, and Jameer Young 22. They need more of that, and we'll see if they've got it against a Nebraska team that's really good. They lost at Nebraska earlier this year, and they've got Nebraska coming to College Park at noon on Saturday. And again, it's still got a month or so to go. Maybe 5 weeks left in the season, and you're going to have to win a significant number of games and pull some upsets along the way to have any chance of being in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. Otherwise, you got to win the Big Ten tournament, and with Purdue and Michigan, and it's not going to be an easy thing to do. All right, let me move on to this. This is what's happening in the NFL. The jobs are starting to fill up, and as expected, Jim Harbaugh got the Chargers job last night, and he finished his career as a player there in 1999 and 2000, so it's sort of a homecoming for him. And it brings up the question with Harbaugh bailing before the NCAA is really going to look into the shenanigans that were going on there. The Big Ten has already had its say. They've suspended him the 3 games. That didn't matter. They won the 3 without him and went on to win the national championship. But now it's like, and I saw something on Twitter today, which is very fitting. It's the scene from Shawshank Redemption when they realize that Andy Dufresne is no longer in the prison cell, and they tear the Farrah Fawcett poster off the wall, and there's this enormous hole there where Dufresne dug the tunnel to get out of Shawshank. And that's pretty much what the situation is now with Harbaugh. Now that he's with the Chargers, he don't have to talk to the NCAA. That's all over with. Michigan moves on. I'm sure they'll be hit with some sanctions. Whoever replaces him, I don't think is going to have a suspension, but you never know how that's going to work out. But Harbaugh's off the hook in what is a world in college football which is so different now than it was just 3 years ago. And for Fox, Feldman covers what's his first name? Anyway, I think it's Brian Feldman is the one that Bruce Feldman is the one that covers college football for them, and he was on with Rich Eisen yesterday, and there is a story in the Wall Street Journal that says that Ohio State is paying 8 figures, not 6 figures, not 7 figures, 8 figures in NIL money to players. And it's not so much that the players shouldn't get paid, but it's what college football looks like now and why it makes sense for Jim Harbaugh to take his services to the NFL. This is Eisen and Bruce Feldman.
Potentially 8 figures of money to give to players, legally, clearly, through the manner of which our world exists in college football. Like, we're now seeing that part of college football change, to me.
I think it's become more of a front burner subject because I think there's more Georgia thought they were getting Caleb Downs. They didn't. He ended up at Ohio State. There's certain, Quinshon Judkins was a terrific running back who couldn't leave yet for the NFL because he's only been in college 2 years.
Yes.
Left Ole Miss, where they are very, not just very invested in NIL, but I feel like that organization has really figured it out of how to make it work. What
do you mean? Because I'm shocked you would say that, since a JUCO transfer showed up in a yellow Lamborghini to sign his papers with Ole Miss.
I think
it's kind of crazy. I mean, serious. I'm just.
But this is a different day and age, because a couple of years ago, I remember. And this, I don't want to make this as like this is only Ohio State.
No,
a couple of years ago, Travion Henderson, great running back. I think he was a true freshman at the time, freshman. And, they have a car dealership, and he is with, what looks, it's, I don't know, $70,000 SUV. And this is not like, plenty of high-level players have some kind of NIL component with car dealerships and everything, and that's acceptable. And so I think there's a lot of stuff that gets, and I could be doing this in a 5-minute segment of conflating, okay, they're paying this as a recruiting inducement as opposed to they're rewarding this as part of an NIL program. There's a lot of stuff that has now been put under this umbrella, and I think that the programs and the schools that are the most organized about it, and again, I think Ole Miss has become proactive. They've gotten some really good players to go, especially from one kid who was a really good edge rusher who was at Florida and now is at Ole Miss. Walter Nolan, who is as highly rated a defensive lineman, has come out of high school in the last few years, was at Texas A&M. Now they have upgraded the roster considerably because one of the people who runs their collective was a former Walker Jones, former CAA agent who then worked for Under Armour, but also former Ole Miss player. In retrospect, I think if you were to said, if you were an AD or who would you want to be in that position I'm like, man, that would kind of be the profile. A guy who played there, a guy who understands the business world, the sports business world, and who understands the culture. I think those are the things that we're starting to see go into those directions, as opposed to some random money guy who may have been the guy who was the under the table guy 7 years ago.
Yeah,
for
the local Buddy Garrity, so. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the, co-chairs, for lack of a better phrase, I don't know if this is the exact title, of Ohio State's collective is Cardell Jones. And they announced that C.J. Stroud made a significant major contribution to the collective.
What could be better than that if you're an Ohio State person? C.J. Stroud was I'm not saying you're critical of it.
No,
but
trust me, I'm not being critical. It's because I do want to also say, players deserve their money. I mean, I'm watching this because of the players, the Jimmies and Joes, right? And it seems like the guys who draw up the X's and O's can get to go wherever the heck they want. They can coach in a national championship game one minute and then start wearing a script A the next. And that's Kalen DeBoer's worked his ass off to come out of South Dakota to be Alabama's head coach. So I'm not criticizing or I guess saying you shouldn't have when it comes to the players at all. I'm just saying, where are the rules? And I wouldn't blame Jim Harbaugh, who seems to have cracked a code here, to basically say, I'm going to go to the pros where I know when free agency starts. I know when I can talk to a free agent. I know how much the free agent's going to make. I know what the cap is. I know what my capologist is going to do. And I know I can't speak to a player or have them in the building until April this. I mean, there's rules.
Right.
There's actual rules and contracts and unions.
Yeah, and that's why I think that Jim Harbaugh has headed off to the NFL. He probably could have made more money if he stayed at Michigan, and because he's won a national championship there, could have stayed as long as he wanted. He's 60 years old. But he's getting out now because he's got pro sports with rules, right? In the NFL, as Eisen just laid out there. College, it's the wild, wild west. And yes, sure, a school like Michigan can benefit, but they're being outspent now by Ohio State to make sure that whoever replaces Harbaugh at Michigan doesn't beat Ohio State next year and make it 4 in a row. And that's where college sports is. We knew it was going to get to this because the NCAA never put anything in place. They spent all their money in court trying to fight this until the Supreme Court said, no, this is almost a form of slavery here. No, we can't have that. So that brought in the NIL, which also came with the transfer portal, and it's mashugana right now. And Harbaugh got his title, got out. All the cheating that he may or may not have done, he's not going to have to answer to it. He's now head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers as life moves on. Coming up, Ed Reed, Hall of Fame safety for the Baltimore Ravens. His conversation with Joe Buck and what the reception was for John Harbaugh when he took over as coach 16 years ago. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
If you're just jumping in your car, Wes Unseld Jr. out as coach of the Wizards, gets bumped to the front office. They expect to name a replacement for him, interim coach, later today. They got to do something because they got Utah coming into play. Wizards 7-36 this year. Unseld's record since he took over July 17th of 2021. 77-130. Also keep in mind, when he took the job, they were not in this tank mode. They had Bradley Beal. I guess Beal was coming to the end of the contracts before they gave him the max, and the thinking was a little bit different. Now they have a team president, Michael Winger, who made this move today. I guess I knew they had to know that it would be bad. Maybe they didn't think it would be this bad. Clearly the worst defensive team in the NBA, and they have the second worst record, and they've already lost to the team with the worst record. That's the Pistons. So whoever's going to have to finish up this mess, the reality is that they're probably going to even make some more moves before the trade deadline to decimate the roster even more. So it's a sunken ship. You just have to, I guess, sit at the wheel for the rest of the year. All right, Ed Reed, who's a Hall of Fame safety for the Baltimore Ravens, helped them win their last Super Bowl, played at the U, Miami, won a national championship there, a Hall of Famer. Guest with Joe Buck in a series of interviews that are being released now on YouTube. And I love every day going through them and picking out the highlights. And so the Ed Reed story begins in Louisiana, where he was struggling academically. And the very interesting part of his life story, he moved in with a teacher so that he could get his academics straight and be able to go to college and play football. He was not going to be academically eligible, but he needed some tutoring help, and he felt like the best chance for him to get it was to actually live with a teacher who was willing to take him in. And sure enough, he got his grades to the point where he was able to go to the University of Miami, and that's where he wound up in the late stages of the 20th century.
So you get to Miami in '97, you redshirt your first year.
Yeah, I thought it was the worst thing ever, Joe.
You wish you had just gone right in and played?
At the time, I did.
Was it the right thing for you?
No. I sprained my ankle really bad 2 days before we had to report to training camp. I'm sick. I'm like, oh, my God, what? This ain't right. So I missed the first couple of days. The swelling went down, and I'm like, man, tape this up. I'm out there. Let's go. I'm out there limping and making plays, and like, you know what? This ain't as hard as I thought. But I'm slow and I'm gaining weight, and coach is like, we redshirting you, dude. I'm like, redshirting me? No, coach, I can play, man. Then I'm on the sideline looking at some of my players, my teammates like, oh no, oh no, you can put me in a wheelchair and I can be better than these guys.
Really?
I mean, that's how it is. I've never been a guy to doubt my ability. And I'm not a guy to downplay yours, but I'm not gonna doubt mine. I know what I could do. And that's all it was. I'm like, man, put me in there. And my roommate from freshman year is Reggie Wayne.
Wow.
Hall of Fame receiver. He played his freshman year, so he helped me get through it, but that's my brother for life. We like chameleons because we can adapt to any situation.
Your second year you play.
Yeah.
And then in 2000, you guys finish 11-1, but the BCS computer, they keep Miami out of the title game.
Yeah, man, nobody likes Miami.
Oh, it was a conspiracy.
It's still like that to this day, man.
Is it?
Come on, man, there's a lot of conspiracy going around in this world.
And Miami's on the list.
Oh, number 2.
Number 2.
Number 2. Number 2.
Well, who's number 1 in the conspiracy?
This country.
Okay. So it goes, in your mind, it goes from the United States of America to the University of Miami football program.
Man, don't get me into that, Joe, man.
All right.
Don't get me into that.
So how important, you don't get the opportunity as a junior to win the whole thing.
Yeah.
You could have left.
Yeah.
You were good enough to leave, but how important was winning a national championship for the Miami Hurricanes to you?
That's why I went there. Graduate, national championship. 4 years I graduated. My senior year, if I come back, which I already knew,
You guys were loaded.
I had one class my senior year, and all I could do is play football. I got friends in the league, so finance is not a problem if I needed it. You know? I'm at University of Miami. Finances ain't never been a problem.
They're paying you anyway.
If you need it.
I'm just kidding.
If you needed it. I mean,
Right.
that's true for every college state. Nobody in here is stupid to it. Y'all know, as well as I know, there's sharks. They're everywhere around the NCAA. So if you need it, trust me, you could get it. If you're any kind of player, they'll pay for you. They'll
So
give it to you, you know? I wouldn't take it, though. All right, maybe one time.
All right.
I needed a flight home to go get my car.
Hey, this is not a deposition.
It's all good now.
You've not been injected with truth serum.
It's all good.
All right, so you come back for your senior year. Your team is friggin' insanely good.
Yeah.
Shockey, Gore, Andre Johnson,
Clint Portis,
Greg, Jonathan Vilma.
Willis McGahee, Jerome McDougal, Vince Wilfork. You can name a bunch of first-rounders, Antrell Rowe, Sean Taylor, who was behind me, rest his soul. I mean, you had so many guys, Kelly Jennings, Philip Buchanan. No team was going to beat us.
Imagine that. Sean Taylor is a backup on that Miami team. Play behind Ed Reed. Ed Reed's a Hall of Famer. Sean Taylor might have been had he tragically not been killed. Anyway, that team did win the national championship. He gets drafted by the Ravens. It's a couple of years after they win their first Super Bowl under Brian Billick. Billick goes another few years, gets fired, and in comes John Harbaugh. And John Harbaugh gives off the impression that he's beloved by the players. He also doesn't come across as a hard ass. But listen to what Ed Reed says about how John Harbaugh arrived on the scene in Baltimore and how he was greeted.
I can honestly say no. I can honestly say that it was shaky to know where we were heading. Even though we were having the conversations about where we wanted to go, and that didn't change. And that was winning the championship. That's all Coach talked about. You know, Coach Harbaugh came in like, it's my way or the highway. And we like, Coach, no. And I still feel that way. Some of the stuff he did and how he handled things, I just didn't agree.
When you say stuff, I don't want you to...
Okay, well, let me be clear. Let me be clear. Let me be clear, because I don't have a problem with that. When Coach first got there, we had training camp practice, and he's mad because, you know, players are talking about the system and how he's doing things, and, you know, we're an older group, and we know football, and he know we talking. He know we in there frustrated. He know, you know, his system is hard, but he also know his vision, which we don't know yet. Coach called everybody up. Y'all come in. Come closer. You can imagine us being a team and working towards one common goal and somebody saying, F you if you don't believe in this. F you, this, that. We're like, whoa. And I'm the only person, whoa. Loud, whoa. Whoa, what? I got to get out this huddle. I got to back up out this. I ain't a part of that. No. This needs to be nipped in the bud. Coach Harbaugh up there talking to us. He's like, yes, Ed. I said, Coach, so us as a team been talking, us as players, we want to know where you were coming from earlier when you said F us. Because I know I need that offensive lineman. I need my D coordinator to be on point. I need Torrey Smith to catch that ball and Quan Bolden to catch that ball that Joe throw to them. I need them. So what are you coming from saying F you? Because we're supposed to be together. I'm working my ass off to come back and you want me to play for you? It ain't gonna happen. Not with that attitude. So after the meeting, he came up to me and we just started talking, man. I believe we got a lot closer after that. And we talked a lot of football, Coach and I. And I got a lot of respect for Coach, but it was shaky. It was like two brothers. It's like two brothers, you know, you have those disagreeing moments kind of in your face where you want to fight him. But that's your brother. And I really, truly believe that about he and I. Like, it was a connection to just something, you know, that helped us get over that hump.
I would have never figured that about John Harbaugh, and he's very religious. Publicly, he does not use the F word. Now, maybe he does with the team, but that's a side of him that I would not have expected. Anyway, more from Ed Reed. Harbaugh's there. They get close a couple times. They make it to the AFC Championship. They lose to the Patriots. Finally, it gets to the 2012 season. Ed Reed had come aboard in 2002, so he's getting long in the tooth. He's getting tired of not winning a championship. He'd won one at Miami, expected to do it in Baltimore, and it wasn't happening. And finally, at the start of the 2012 season, he addressed the team and the coaches. And as he told Joe Buck, this is what he said.
I'm like, Coach, team, we're not going to win a championship. Y'all don't want to win a championship because we got a bunch of lowlifes in here. And they start laughing like some of y'all, like lowlifes, really? You can call it lowlifes? You know, and I'm like, yeah, lowlife. Because we got volunteer firemen walking around here cleaning up after grown men, right? My locker, your locker, is 2 feet from the garbage can. You come off, cut your tape off your ankles, your wrists, and instead of you throwing it in the garbage can, where you throw it at? On the floor. I'm like, listen, guys, this is the little things, man. Pick up your towel. You walking out, the dirty bin is right there when you walk out. Why are you leaving that towel in there for somebody else to come in there and clean up? I did it myself because I didn't want the firemen to have to look at my nasty-ass teammates' towels and have to pick them up all the time. That's all the teammates that can vouch for that. And they can vouch for this story because it's true. Super Bowl year. We ain't winning it if y'all don't do the little things.
And did you sense a shift?
Yes. No doubt. We started to come together even more so. I said, we're going to the Super Bowl in New Orleans, and we're winning it.
It's I mean, wow. But you had to take steps to get there. You've made the small things speech. You get into the postseason again. You have this great double overtime game with the Denver Broncos. Yeah. And you got to be thinking when you win that game, okay, all right, now we're winning a game that maybe in the past we might not have won.
Yeah. Finding a way to get there.
So you get past the New England Patriots. Now you get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it don't matter who we playing against. They ain't winning.
You're playing against San Francisco.
Yep, team I grew up watching, my favorite team,
Joe Montana was your guy.
Lott. Nobody can script the stuff that I've been through.
And part of the script is the Super Bowl of all years is in New Orleans.
It's unreal, Joe. I can't tell that story. People won't believe that I grew up in Louisiana 5 minutes, a bus ride. I mean, a bus ride from the Superdome to go back home in your hometown, stand in a hotel looking at a river your brother passed in a year ago. Nobody won't believe that script.
It's your brother Brian.
Last thing my city heard about me, God darn it, was that my brother passed, you know? And I was standing out there. And I remember the cameras being out there and these people just saying all the wrong things as they say and me getting mad. And nobody's seeing it. I'm looking at that media person. I'm so mad because I already deal with media in my job, and now my brother passed and these people out here and just doing all the wrong things. But when we made it to the Super Bowl, I had already won. I'm in front of my hometown in a stadium I grew up watching. Dalton Hilliard, Ricky Williams, and all these guys who I idoled. We here. There's a divine hand on this.
Who was in the crowd? Jean
wasn't?
Hall?
Who wasn't? Yep.
How many tickets you have?
Oh, man. Honestly, Steve Bisciotti came up to me
The owner of the Ravens.
couple days before the game, was like, hey, you need any extra tickets? I'm like, sure, whatever you got, I'll take them. He's like, nah, tell me what you need. I'm like, Steve, listen to me. I could fill up the Superdome.
Right. There is not a number of tickets you can give me that I can't fill.
I bought a suite, plus I had like 80 or 90 tickets.
I don't know if he paid for all those. Face value, even then, you're going back 11 years, was over $1,000. So, he's probably spent a couple $100,000 just to get his family into the game. And that's not an insignificant amount of money, even though he made a lot when he played, and they make a lot more now than he made then. But that was the crowning moment for him in his career. So they get to the Super Bowl, the game, and they're playing the San Francisco 49ers. Colin Kaepernick, the quarterback. In fact, Alex Smith had started the season for the 49ers, had a concussion, missed a game. Kaepernick stepped in. Smith never got his job back and went to Kansas City the following year. Starts out great for the Ravens. They're up 21-3 late in the first half. San Francisco kicks a field goal. Okay, it's 21-6. They get to the third quarter, and then the lights go out. Here's Ed Reed's take on why that happened at the Superdome on that day of the Super Bowl, 49ers, Ravens.
And we lost power at half of the stadium. Now, it's no question this delay is going to affect the momentum of this game.
That's crazy. You guys are killing them 28-6. The game's in the bag, and the lights go out in the Superdome.
Now we getting back to the conspiracy ad.
Oh, God. And you had that last shot of you like on the field stretching. We now know your knees were jacked up.
Yeah, you can see the wrap on the left knee. I got a 2nd-degree MCL sprain on this knee and a 1st-degree MCL sprain on this knee in the first quarter. Oh, golly, man, how we gonna get through this? Oh my God, there's no way I'm going. I can't
tap out.
I'm in the game. Now cut back to when the lights come on. It take a old 78 a little longer to get warmed up than those 89s.
Right.
That was on San Francisco team, because they were like, we were older. And whoever hit that switch knew that too. I mean, you hear the commentator, right? You got to listen to him, man. Somebody knows something. Somebody did something. It has to benefit San Francisco more than it benefit the Ravens. So somebody knew something. Did it get out of hand? Maybe we cut the lights off and blame it on Beyonce.
Always gets back to Queen Bee.
You know what? Actually, she did the halftime show, but you can't blame B because they was at the party, man.
But after the lights go out,
Yeah.
the momentum's gone,
Yeah.
and now San Francisco
Comes back.
Oh, yeah, they did. They scored 17 unanswered points, so they make it now 28-23. Ravens leading now 34-29, just over 2 minutes left to go, and San Francisco gets down to the 7-yard line. And finally, on 4th down, there was a stop made by Ed Reed. Ravens later take a safety. They win the game 34-31. So it was good stuff. Good stuff from Ed Reed with Joe Buck. Tomorrow we'll play the Joe Torre conversation, in which, if you were with us at the start of this hour, I explained that one of the things he said is something that I was not aware of. That 2001 World Series after 9/11, where they played Arizona, Yankees, as Torre's managing the Yankees, and had already won 4 World Series championships. He's now got his team back home. George Bush, the president at the time, throws out the first ball, and most people know he was wearing a bulletproof vest. I did not know this till I heard the conversation, that one of the umpires was a Secret Service man in disguise, that he was also wearing a bulletproof vest and was there to protect the president should anything happen. Wow, that was really great. And Torre is so good at telling stories. I'm really anxious to play that for you tomorrow. Coming up next, Jason Kelce explains his old school behavior in front of Taylor Swift last weekend in Buffalo. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
I got Tony on a Thursday. Tony coming up today at 11 o'clock. And if you're just getting used to the world today, not up on things, haven't checked your phone, it hasn't crossed your phone, whatever it is, Wes Unseld Jr., no longer coaching the Washington Wizards, moved into the front office with an overall record of 77 and 130 since he was hired in the summer of 2021 to 7 and 36 this year. Only the Pistons are worse. I know they expected this to be a bad season. Maybe they didn't expect to be this bad. Worst defensive team for a guy who's got this reputation as being a guy who can coach defense. Certainly couldn't do it here. He's said in a statement, "I'm grateful to have served as head coach of the Wizards. I look forward to this new opportunity to work towards our organization's continued progress." It was a very Ted-ish move, a marketing move when they hired him. He had a reputation, no question. To be fair, he had worked his way up the ranks. His name probably didn't hurt him, but he never got to even a high level of college basketball. He played Division III at Hopkins, and took his lumps in the film room, as people do, and worked his way up the chain, and eventually became an assistant coach with Denver, and then came here in 2021 to, as many have tried to do, improve the defense and failed miserably. And I don't know who they're going to name. They say they got to have somebody for tonight because they got Utah in town. But they say that they will have an interim coach, and then we'll spend the offseason searching for a new one. I guess a lot of it will depend on how the draft picks line up. Who's going to be the hot guy coming into the draft who the Wizards could take. They could finish as high as one. They're almost certainly going to wind up with one of the worst 3 records in the league, so they'll have a chance at one of the top 3 picks, maybe even the top 1, and then maybe they can attract somebody. But I the thing is, they're probably still a couple of years away from being competitive. So, do you want somebody here who's going to lose a whole bunch of games over the next 2 years, or do you have somebody else take the lumps on that and then go after your big fish? Although there aren't that many big fish. Doc Rivers got hired with the Bucks yesterday, but his record in deciding games is terrible. He's won 1 championship. He's a good coach and a good person, and maybe he's exactly what the Bucks need. But it's not like going out and getting Phil Jackson anymore. There's no Phil Jackson coming through that door. Those guys at the moment don't exist. A lot of times you see the names of coaches, and you go, really? He coaches that team? Gee, I really didn't know that. Eric Spoelstra, I guess, is the dean of them. And he won a couple of championships with LeBron and Wade, and he's been to the finals a couple of times. But, when he doesn't have and he does a very good job, no question about it. And he is highly compensated, the highest paid coach in the league. But he's not the be-all, end-all, and free agents don't come running to play for him. All right, so last weekend we had this playoff game in Buffalo, the Chiefs and the Bills, and Taylor Swift was there to support her boyfriend, Travis, the star tight end with the Chiefs. They had a box. And, you really wouldn't think of it this way. You think, well, Jason Kelce's his brother. Surely he's met Taylor Swift. No. This was the first meeting between the older brother, Jason, whose career is probably now over with the Philadelphia Eagles losing into the playoffs, and reports that he's going to retire. He went to the box, and he went full cowabunga. Took off his shirt in the freezing cold weather, pounded beers, the whole Megillah. And he said, going there, first time meeting Taylor Swift, perhaps his future sister-in-law, his wife had a warning for him, as he explained yesterday on the podcast that he does with Travis.
So she's like, do not be on your best behavior. I was like, Kylie, when I met you, the first day I met you, I was blacked out drunk and fell asleep at the bar. This is part of the charm. This is part of the Jason Kelce charm. I want to make my best first impression. This is my best chance.
My best first impression is the worst impression ever. So I could just build from that point on. Yeah, exactly. That shit was classic. Oh man. Well, Tay said she absolutely loved you. So anyway.
Well,
I felt like it was a scene out of Old School.
Oh, yeah, it was. And now we know the pet nickname for Taylor Swift. I'd not heard that before. Tay. Yeah, Jason calls her Tay. I wonder when she calls him. I don't know if she's been asked about that yet. He did take off his shirt. He didn't go all the way like Will Ferrell.
We're going streaking through the quad and into the gymnasium. Come on, everybody! Woo! Come on! We're streaking! Come on! Come on! We're running! Come on! We're streaking! We're streaking!
Frank!
Hey, honey! Hey!
What the hell are you doing?
We're streaking!
Frank, get in the car.
Everybody's doing it.
Now!
Okay. Honey, do you think KFC's still open?
That's to see he's streaking, running down the street naked, and it's his wife who's driving around with a few of her girlfriends, and he's running alongside her, and she says, get in the car. She played Ari Gold's wife in Entourage. And we didn't know her name until like the last year of the series. Her name was Melissa. He always called her sweetheart. But yeah, that was one of the great scenes from Old School. He didn't go quite that far. If Jason went full clothesless, I guess, as Will Ferrell did, you wonder how that would have played over. But yeah, I mean that's. I guess you know what? If you're going to behave that way, you might as well do it in your first meeting so that she knows exactly what she's going to be dealing with. And if Travis Kelce is telling the truth, the perhaps future brother-in-law didn't scare her off, And as he said, hey, when I met you, to his wife, I was passed out drunk at the bar. So, maybe that's how they roll. And that was, I guess, we could get a repeat of this, right? That's not a night game. It's an afternoon game, but I would imagine the whole mishpucha is rolling into Baltimore this weekend. And they will have a box, and it's good for ratings. 50 million people watch that playoff game. I got to believe that a percentage of them were there to see the Taylor Swift effect. And was the Taylor Swift effect enhanced by shirtless Jason Kelce doing shots and he even at one point climbed out of the box? You see him in the stands just below the box with the people. Is that going to be a repeat? Tell you one thing though about the Ravens, and this we knew this pretty much going into the week, but yesterday, Wednesday, first full practice day, and Mark Andrews was a full participant. So they're already in great shape offensively and defensively. And now they get back a tight end who's been to 3 Pro Bowls, was all pro between 2019 and 2022. He's in his prime, 6th year. Hasn't played in over 2 months because of a broken leg, but could be back. Remember, T.O. had a similar injury to Terrell Owens and played in the Super Bowl and had 12 catches against the Patriots. So he could be a big factor. He played only 10 games this year, but still had 45 catches and 6 touchdowns, 544 yards. So what is already an excellent offense and a healthy offense adds a Pro Bowl tight end. I keep saying this, and I may turn out to be loud wrong, dead wrong, but I just look at this Baltimore team, and as good as Kansas City is, I don't think I've seen a team on both sides of the ball with the best kicker in history have this much on both sides. I mean, there are great defensive teams. Sometimes we get great offensive teams. Kansas City has been pretty much both, but I don't know to this extent. This Baltimore defense is better than the Kansas City defense, and although it's not Patrick Mahomes, it's a quarterback who's Lamar Jackson, who's going to win a second MVP. And they look like, as the old cliche goes, like they're hitting on all cylinders, and they just added another big cylinder for Sunday's game, 3 o'clock kickoff. Tomorrow we do Ravens preview. That'll be at 10:30. We'll take an extended look at the game coming up on Sunday at M&T Bank Stadium. Coming up in the next hour, if you missed Tony's conversation yesterday with Mitch Albom, who's lived in Detroit for almost 40 years, sports writer, has written books. He'll give you the picture of what it's like to be in that city, a city that hasn't had a football team that's been anywhere near good since they came here and played the then Washington Redskins for the NFC Championship. but that was 32 years ago. Wow. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. All right, the news today. I heard the news today just before we went on the air at 9 o'clock. Wes Unseld Jr. transitioning from head coach of the Wizards to a front office advisory position. Translation, they're paying off the rest of his contract, which I believe was extended in the offseason. So he may be in the front office for a while. I don't think anybody's going to run out and offer him a head coaching position, not with a career record of 77 and 130 and 7 and 36 this year off a loss last night to Minnesota. Actually, for them, they played reasonably well defensively. 118 points given up, average of over 125 for the season for a coach who's supposed to be a defensive specialist. Now, he didn't have a lot to work with after the Beal trade and with, outside of Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole. What do they have? They don't have much. Denny Advia, good, solid player. They don't have superstar players, and the plan, obviously, they won't say it, but it's to tank. And I figured, well, if you're tanking, why not, just ride it out with what's Unseld. There could be some things that are happening behind the scenes, which they say, we just can't keep going like this. It could be that they expected him to develop some of the younger players better than he has so far. Who knows? But as far as the record, it's the more they lose, the better off they are in terms of ping pong balls and where they can be going in the draft lottery. Now, there does not appear to be a Victor Wembanyama coming out this year, but the higher you are in the draft, the better off you're going to be. And, to me, it just seems odd that you would fire a coach who's already got the horse is already dead, so who cares who the jockey is right now? But they're going to have somebody else for the rest of the season. What's left? What have they played? That's 43 games, so a little more than half the season over with, and they'll finish it up with somebody else and then have somebody in the offseason. I don't think that there's a big name out there who would want to come here. And is there a player like a Victor Wembanyama which you could hitch your wagon to and ultimately win a championship with? Who knows? Who knows what's coming out in the draft this year, but it doesn't appear that there's going to be anybody like that. Meantime, we got the Milwaukee Bucks situation, and that was really stunning the other day when the Bucks, with the second best record in the league at 30-13, fired Adrian Griffin, who's in his first year on the job. Those were the only games that he had ever coached in the NBA, and he was winning. It was 30-13. But the speculation was, and anytime you have something like this, the speculation would be that one of the stars of the team didn't want him, most notably Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard, perhaps. He came over in a trade from Portland. One of them didn't want him, and the defense wasn't very good, but they were winning enough games. So Antetokounmpo last night, and they did win. They won against Cleveland 126-116. Antetokounmpo said about the move to get rid of Adrian Griffin and hire Doc Rivers, and we'll have more on Rivers in just a moment. He says, I got to trust the front office. I got to trust the ownership group that they consider the bigger picture. He says, my job is to be the best version of myself, to lead the team out there and help win games. Their job is to create the best team possible and the best atmosphere around the team possible that they believe gives them a better chance to win the championship. But then he says, and I guess if he's Pinocchio, his nose might grow, but he says, yeah, I do think that firing Griffin was a surprise. Really? Or were you the one behind it? He's not going to say on that. He refuted the idea that he didn't have a good relationship with Adrian Griffin or that he was involved in the decision. He said, I love the guy. I invited him to my wedding. I was coached by him, and we did very, very, very well. When somebody is being hired, the GM might come and ask, what do you think about that? What do you think about this? Or whatever. It's just not me. Players, people that he trusts, it gives their advice. But at times, they make it seem like it's the players that are making the decision. Well, yes, the players make the decision. LeBron James has been doing that for 20 years. He decides who he wants as a coach. And when he doesn't want him to be their coach anymore, they get fired. He's the de facto coach anyway, but he'll decide who he wants on the sidelines, at least looking like a coach. Damian Lillard said after last night's game, there's been a lot of expectations on our team. Things have been expected to look a certain way. We had a bumpy road to our success, which is sometimes a part of the process. I was surprised, but it's part of the game. People get traded, people get waived, people get fired, and that's never something that you want to see. That takes us to a different place. That's a little bit different than what Antetokounmpo said about, yeah, I love the guy. I had him at my wedding. I didn't ask for him to go. And Lillard is a little bit more vague on that. A lot of expectations. Things have been expected. We had a bumpy road to our success. Sometimes a part of the process. I was surprised, but it was part of the game. Hey, people get traded, people get waived, people get fired. That's never something you want to see. But he's not saying, hey, I had nothing to do with this. So maybe it was him. Maybe it was Damian Lillard who said, get this guy out of here. Tim Legler last night with Scott Van Pelt, and this is Legler's take on the hiring of Doc Rivers, who leaves the broadcast booth after, half a season with ESPN. Everybody was surprised when Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy got blown out last year, and they brought in Doc Rivers and Doris Burke to work with Mike Breen. Well, Rivers is going back to coaching, and reports are they're just going to stick with Breen and Doris, which would be fine. I don't think announcers necessarily make you watch a game. You might stay a little bit longer with it because Jackson and Van Gundy had really good chemistry, and Breen is great, and he was friends with both of them, and it really flowed. But Doris Burke knows her stuff. Mike Breen's a great announcer. There's no place else to watch the finals and the playoffs that lead up to it, so you're going to watch. But this is Legler's take on the hiring of Doc Rivers and why the Bucks would do this with a record that is now 31-13.
Number one, he's just going to command great respect because that's what he gets around the league. And certainly the star players, Giannis and Damian Lillard, the most important in the group, they're going to respect him on a different level because of what this guy's accomplished in the league. He's going to be able to help them, I think, from an X's and O's standpoint, schematically, with some of the defensive things that have gone on. But I think in general, a lot of it's just going to come down to personal effort. I think that's where Doc is going to have the cachet. So I think call guys out, get a little bit more out of people when you watch film, and make guys accountable. I think that's what Doc Rivers brings, probably more than anything else. Adrian Griffin, I just think the organization probably looked at the stakes that are associated with this pairing with Giannis and Lillard, and particularly always one eye on Giannis and making sure he is satisfied that he has a chance to compete at the highest level. And I just don't think they felt they had enough of a veteran-proven presence to navigate what was going to be a very difficult postseason. At 30-13, certainly not fair to Adrian Griffin, but this is professional sports. They're not worried about fair. They're worried about getting it done right now, and they don't necessarily think Adrian Griffin was the right guy for that.
And Doc can come in and play tapes you've done sitting here with me at this year and just say, what is this? That effort on the defensive end is not good enough.
I had examples tonight we could have gone over, but it's some of its effort, some of its personnel, Scott. We talked about this. When you lose the point of attack pressure and physicality of Drew Holiday, what that means to your defense behind that guy, because that's the first thing you see when you're back on defense is what's happening at the point of attack.
And that's a lot.
Very few dudes gave as much as he gave in fighting over screens and hounding guys and never quitting on a play. They've taken a step back in that area. Some of the other guys on their team, I think, through injuries, maybe a little bit slower. So there are some issues from a personnel standpoint there. And they're hoping that Doc Rivers can be the guy to figure out a way to tweak what they're doing and make the adjustments to protect some of these guys from their weaknesses.
About that, he has cachet. He's earned it. But he's also got a record in series and in game sevens that you could look at and say, that doesn't concern you, though, with this team, because why?
Yeah, look, it's fair to bring it up. 5 straight game sevens, I think 10 overall he has lost. It's fair to bring it up, and wondering how he's going to navigate those moments. But here's where I'm going to cut him a break. When I look at what happened in Philly, and these are the most recent ones, the most prominent ones, he's not going to deal in Milwaukee with what he dealt with in Philadelphia, where guys that are played in the All-Star game that year show up in a big spot and decide they're going to play completely differently. It's one thing to have a bad night. That's not even what I'm talking about. When your team is used to star players playing a certain way with a certain level of aggressiveness, and that disappears, and that, I think, also affected the body language of Joel Embiid. When he would see that, I think he kind of felt like, well, I guess I'm out here by myself tonight. Doc's not going to deal with that with these two guys. They embrace the moment. They're going to run to the light and the big stage. Damian Lillard, Giannis, even Middleton. So that's one thing. And the last time Doc had something like that where guys embraced the moment was Boston, 2008 at that level, and he won a championship. So I'm going to give Doc the benefit of the doubt. He's not going to have to push as many buttons on a given night when you have those two players. The offense is going to run itself when you've got guys that good. I think in Philly sometimes he was kind of wondering, how am I supposed to work around this when my all-star starting point guard is having one of these nights where he's in a very dark place and I can't get any aggressiveness out of him? He's not going to deal with that with this group.
Well, we'll see how it works out. He's a fine guy. I met Doc Rivers, like him very much, and I think everybody who knows him likes him, or has met him, I should say, likes him very much. The question is, is he going to be able to get this team to where it expects to go? It's championship or bust with a roster with now Damian Lillard joining Giannis Antetokounmpo, and they've already won without Lillard. Lillard now aboard, so we'll see what happens. But, good analysis there from Tim Legler, and I'm rooting for Doc Rivers. I hope it does work out for him. And his record, there's no getting around his record. In those championship games, those Game 7s, he generally loses, and that's not a good thing. The other side of it is maybe they're good enough not to get to Game 7. Maybe they can win these series in 6 or less. So we'll see. Coming up in just a few minutes, I'm going to play the conversation that Tony had yesterday with Mitch Albom. He's been living and working in Detroit for the last 40 years, and finally the Lions are back in the NFC Championship game. The last time they were in it was when they came here in January of 1992 to play the Redskins, and it wasn't pretty if you were a Lions fan. 41-10 was the final. Washington pretty much could have named the score. They had already beaten the Lions to open the season, winning 45-0. Barry Sanders didn't play in that game, but he wouldn't have made a 45-point difference if he had. And that was really the game that launched the famous bandwagon columns that Tony did. He said, man, this team, they're good. Let's just make fun of how good they are. And he wrote these columns that became very popular on Tuesday in the Post, and then he rode the bandwagon to the Super Bowl. He and some others from the Post took a Winnebago to the Super Bowl in Minneapolis, where they beat the Buffalo Bills for their last championship. The game was the last playoff game that was ever played at RFK Stadium. They stayed there for another 5 seasons, but didn't make the playoffs, didn't make it until they got to FedEx Field. They hosted a game there against Detroit and didn't host another one for like another 15 years or something like that until they played the Packers. They haven't had many there. They they lost again to Tampa with Tom Brady during the COVID year, but there haven't been many playoff games in town since then, and that was the last one at RFK. Good look back in the Post today by Scott Allen. He points out that the Lions came here on a 7-game winning streak, which began with a Week 12 victory marred by tragedy. On the first play of the fourth quarter of Detroit's 21-10 win over the Rams, Lions right guard Mike Utley suffered a spinal cord injury that largely left him paralyzed from the chest down. Utley flashed the thumbs-up sign as he was carried off the field, and the gesture became a rallying cry for the team, which dedicated the remainder of the season to the 25-year-old. After Detroit's surprising 38-6 rout of the Cowboys at the Silverdome, team owner William Clay Ford delivered a game ball to Utley, who had watched the win on television from the Englewood, Colorado hospital where he was rehabbing. Lions were 13.5-point underdogs against Washington here. Wow, 13.5 for a championship game. But that's how good Washington was in those days. And they had not won here in ages. They'd never won at the stadium. Detroit 0-15 dating back to games at Griffith Stadium, and had lost 14 straight to Washington since 1965. Their linebacker, Chris Spielman, said, that was then, this is now, we don't look at the past. Well, the past wasn't much different than the present on that day as Washington won big. There was also another part of this, and I kind of forgotten about the exact timing of this, and good for Scott for looking this up. A different tragedy weighed heavily on the hearts and minds of Washington players and fans. Before kickoff, a message flashed on the RFK scoreboard that the game was being dedicated to beloved Channel 9 sportscaster Glenn Brenner, who had been diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor 2 days earlier. Joe Gibbs told reporters that the team offered a prayer for Brenner on Saturday night. Brenner reading, "We love you, Glenn." Banners reading, "We love you, Glenn," and "Win one" for the Brenner hung from the stands. And I remember that time. It was awful. Glenn Brenner had run in the marathon, the Marine Corps marathon, and he collapsed at the finish line, and they thought that he had a stroke, and he was in the hospital for months, and they couldn't figure out what it was, and finally they did a biopsy just a couple of days before this game, and they said, oh, massive brain tumor, and that's what killed him a couple of days later. And Gibbs said, he said, what happened to Glenn makes you realize how fragile life is. And he had delivered the game ball to Brenner after the game at George Washington University Hospital, and he died 2 days later at the age of 44. The Lions' loss to Washington was the first of their NFL record 9-game playoff losing streak that ended with a first-round win over the Rams this month. Detroit's run to the NFC Championship game makes Washington, which has conducted virtual interviews with Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson and Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn for its coaching vacancy, the only NFC team that hasn't appeared in at least one conference championship game since 1991. How about that? When they were in that championship game in January of 1992, they were in their 4th NFC championship game in 9 years. And what has happened to the team since, with the expected decline after they had their great run, as they were an aging team and the salary cap was coming in and they had to make changes, and the first retirement of Joe Gibbs. Okay, that was under Jack Kent Cooke, who passed away before the start of the 97 season. And then Dan Snyder takes over in 99, and well, there's no reason for you to say, why did they have this drought? It happened because of him. And so, now the new ownership takes on this little anvil here that they've got around their neck that it has been since January of 92, which is now, 32 years since Washington appeared in the NFC Championship game, and the clock is now ticking as to when they break that streak. Lions have already done that. Lions kind of playing with house money here, right? I mean, they were a team that was thought to been able to make the playoffs. They beat Kansas City in the opening game of the season, and have been a team that has been tracking for the playoffs all year long. But you figure, well, this is their first time in it in a long time, and the coach has never been there before. But they're here in the NFC title game. They're underdogs for sure, but it's an incredible story, and it's a story that Mitch Albom tells very well to Tony Kornheiser. We'll hear that conversation